Imagine you're hiking through a Southeast Asian rainforest. The humidity is oppressive. You've got about 15 pounds of gear on your back, and you've been mosquito bait for the last 2 hours. You've made the classic mistake of wearing cotton in the tropics. Don't do that, by the way. And you're starting to think this nature thing was overrated. Then you hear a rustle in the leaves above. You look up, and there, slithering through the canopy, gliding from tree to tree with the grace of a flying squirrel and the terrifying elegance of something that absolutely should not be airborne, is a snake, a flying snake. Your brain, reasonably, does a small internal meltdown. Because here's the thing, snakes don't fly. Everyone knows that. Snakes are legless, slithering ground-dwelling creatures that belong on the earth or in the water or inside of your worst nightmares. They don't fly. That's not a thing. Except, spoiler alert, it absolutely is a thing. And today, we're going to answer the question that has probably never crossed your mind until right this second. What is a flying snake? Stay with me. Because these creatures are genuinely one of the most bizarre, least understood, and honestly kinda adorable things slithering around this planet. Welcome back to What Is, the channel where we answer questions you didn't know you needed answered, dive into topics you probably never thought about, and occasionally make you reconsider your entire understanding of the natural world. Today we're doing something a little different. We're not talking about a concept or a place or an event. We're talking about an animal, specifically one of the most improbable animals on Earth, the flying snake. By the end of this video, you're going to know more about these gravity-defying serpents than 99.9% of the human population. And you'll probably also be a little unsettled. That's fair. Snakes do that to people. But stick around, because these little guys are genuinely fascinating. And I'm not just saying that because I have a mild snake obsession. Okay, I am saying that, but still, flying snakes, come on. The basics. What exactly is a flying snake? Let's start with the basics. Flying snake is a common name for 5 species within the genus Chrysopelea. That's Chrysopelea, for all you taxonomy enthusiasts out there. And yes, that's a real genus name. No, I don't know who named it. Probably someone who was very excited about Greek words. These snakes belong to the family Colubridae, which is the same family that includes about 1/3 of all known snake species. So technically, flying snakes are just really fancy colubrids. Fancy, flying colubrids. The 5 recognized species are Chrysopelea ornata, the golden tree snake, also called the ornate flying snake. This is probably the most common one you'll see in photos, and honestly, the prettiest. It's got these gorgeous green and gold patterns that look like someone painted it. Chrysopelea paradisi, the paradise tree snake. This one lives up to its name, with stunning green, black, and yellow markings. It's like a piece of jewelry that happens to be a cold-blooded reptile. Chrysopelea peluensis, the Palau flying snake. Found only in the Palau Islands, this one's a bit of a regional celebrity. Chrysopelea rhodopleuron, the Indian flying snake. Found in, wait for it, India. Revolutionary naming there. And finally, Chrysopelea taprabanica, the Sri Lankan flying snake. Found in, you guessed it, Sri Lanka. Someone was really phoning it in on the creative naming department. But here's what's important. All 5 species share one incredible ability. They can glide through the air. Not exactly fly in the way a bird or a bat flies. They're not generating lift with wings or propelling themselves with muscles. But they can launch from trees and glide considerable distances, which is honestly more than enough to freak out anyone who encounters one. So now that we know what they are, let's talk about the elephant, or rather the snake, in the room. How in the absolute heck do they do that? The mechanics. How do they fly? Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Flying snakes are what's called arboreal, which means they live in trees. And like most arboreal snakes, they're excellent climbers. They use their muscular bodies to grip branches and scale trunks with surprising agility. But about 15 million years ago, Or possibly earlier, the timeline is a bit fuzzy. Something cool happened. These tree-dwelling snakes started developing a unique ability. They could flatten their bodies. And I don't mean flatten like when you accidentally sit on a garden hose. I mean flatten. When a flying snake prepares to take a glide, it tenses its muscles and actually widens its rib cage, compressing its normally round body into a sort of concave shape, like a warped frisbee. It then positions itself at the edge of a branch, coils up, and launches. And here's the wild part. It doesn't just fall. It's not a controlled fall, like a skydiver. The flattened body actually creates aerodynamic lift. The snake undulates through the air, moving in a wave pattern much like it does when slithering on the ground. And this movement helps stabilize its glide. It can adjust its trajectory mid-air by making small movements with its body, which is honestly kind of impressive for a creature with 0 limbs. The whole glide typically lasts only a few seconds, but during that time, the snake can travel up to 100 meters, over 300 feet, while losing surprisingly little altitude. Some researchers have recorded glides of nearly 25 meters vertically, which for a snake is basically a skywriting accomplishment. Now I'm going to be honest with you. Scientists have been studying this phenomenon for decades, and they're still not 100% sure exactly how the aerodynamics work. The leading theory is that the snake's flattened body acts like a parachute combined with a glider, creating a larger surface area that catches air and slows the descent, while also generating some forward momentum. But honestly, the more I read about it, the more it seems like these snakes are just doing something that shouldn't work and getting away with it. Like they looked at the laws of physics, shrugged, and said, "Hey, close enough." And honestly, I respect that energy. Habitat and distribution. So where can you find these little glide monsters? Flying snakes are native to South and Southeast Asia. Specifically, you can find them in parts of India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. They're most commonly found in tropical rainforests, but some species have adapted to agricultural areas and even urban environments. The paradise tree snake, Chrysopelea paradisi, is probably the most widespread and studied of the bunch. It lives throughout its range in lowland forests and is particularly comfortable near human settlements. If you're in Thailand or the Philippines and you see a snake gliding between buildings, it's probably this one. Not that that thought is comforting. But hey, it's usually not aggressive, so there's that. The golden tree snake, Chrysopelea ornata, is found across a huge range, from India all the way to China. It's a bit more secretive than its cousins, preferring dense forest canopy where it can hunt in peace. And then there's the Palau flying snake, Chrysopelea paluensis, which, as the name suggests, is only found in Palau. That's a small island nation in the western Pacific Ocean. This snake is so specialized to its island home that it's considered vulnerable to extinction, but more on that later. What's important to note is that these snakes are arboreal. They almost never go to the ground unless they're forced to. They eat, sleep, mate, and travel almost exclusively in the canopy, which is one of the reasons most people never see them. That, and they're relatively small. Most species max out at around 3 to 4 feet long, with the golden tree snake sometimes reaching 5 feet, which is still not enormous by snake standards. So if you're out hiking in Southeast Asia, and you look up and see something gliding between trees, now you know what you're looking at, and you can tell your friends you saw a real live dragon. Close enough. Behavior and diet. Now let's talk about what these snakes actually do all day. Because it's not just gliding, you know, they've got a whole lifestyle. Flying snakes are diurnal, which means they're active during the day. This is unusual for many snake species, which tend to be nocturnal or crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk. But these snakes? They're out here living their best lives while the sun's up. They're also constrictors, which means they kill their prey by wrapping around it and squeezing until the prey suffocates. I know suffocate sounds a bit gentle. Let's just say they cut off blood flow to vital organs, which is scientifically accurate and sounds slightly less gentle. Either way, it's effective. Their diet consists mainly of small vertebrates, birds, lizards, frogs, and sometimes small mammals. They're not venomous to humans, so if one were to bite you, which is unlikely since they're quite docile, it would be like a bee sting. Unpleasant, but not dangerous. Wait, let me make sure I didn't just say not venomous, because I need to be clear here. Flying snakes are completely harmless to humans. They have no venom. They have no fangs worth mentioning. They're not constrictors that can wrap around a human arm and squeeze. Well, they could try, but they're too small to do any real damage. Honestly, if a flying snake tried to hurt you, your worst injury would be a minor scratch and a bruised ego. This is important because a lot of people see a snake, any snake, and assume it's dangerous. But flying snakes are basically the puppy dogs of the snake world. Curious, gentle, and mostly interested in hunting small prey rather than terrifying humans. Of course, that doesn't stop people from being terrified of them. Fear of snakes is one of the most common phobias on the planet. Some studies suggest up to a third of all humans have ophidiophobia, which is the clinical term for fear of snakes. And honestly, seeing a snake gliding towards you at eye level probably doesn't help. But here's the thing, these snakes want absolutely nothing to do with you. They're not aggressive. They're not going to chase you. They're not even going to hang around if you're making noise. They are spectacularly uninterested in human interaction, which is honestly more than I can say for some humans. Myths and misconceptions. Alright, let's address some of the nonsense that gets spread about these creatures, because there's actually a decent amount of misinformation out there. First, let's get this out of the way. No, flying snakes cannot actually fly. They glide. I know I keep emphasizing this, but it's important. They're not levitating. They're not sprouting wings. They're not mini serpents of the sky. They're doing a very specialized form of controlled falling, which is honestly impressive enough without pretending they're magic. Second, no, they're not poisonous. I've seen some truly wild claims on the internet about flying snakes being among the most venomous creatures in Asia, which is just not true. These snakes are completely harmless. I cannot stress this enough. If you see one in the wild, you don't need to do anything except appreciate it from a safe distance and maybe take a cool photo. Third, and this one's a bit more nuanced, they're not trying to fly to get away from predators, or to hunt, or to show off. The current scientific consensus is that gliding is probably an energy-efficient way to move between trees in the canopy. Instead of crawling all the way down one tree, crossing the ground where they'd be vulnerable to predators, and then climbing back up another tree, they can just glide. It's the snake equivalent of taking a shortcut, except the shortcut involves becoming briefly airborne. Some researchers also think that juvenile flying snakes might glide more than adults, possibly because they're smaller and lighter and can glide further. But honestly, there's still a lot we don't know about these creatures. Research is ongoing, and new discoveries are being made all the time. Alright, we're about halfway through this video, and I wanted to take a quick break to say something important. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the wonderful world of flying snakes, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to What Is, if you haven't already. We put a lot of research into these videos, and it helps us out enormously when you engage with the content. Also, if you have questions about flying snakes or any other topics you'd like us to cover, drop them in the comments below. We've got a lot of ideas for future videos, but we're always happy to hear what you want to learn about. Alright, back to the snakes. Conservation status. Now I want to talk about something a little less fun, but still important. Conservation. Most flying snake species are currently listed as least concern by the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which means they're not immediately threatened with extinction. This is good news generally, but it's not a reason to be complacent. The biggest threats to flying snakes are habitat loss and fragmentation. As Southeast Asia experiences more deforestation for agriculture, logging, and urban development, these arboreal snakes lose the canopy habitat they need to survive. They're not adapted to living on the ground, so when their forest homes disappear, they have nowhere to go. The Palau flying snake, Chrysopelea pilawensis, is in a slightly more precarious position. It's found only on a few islands in Palau, and its habitat is limited. It's currently listed as vulnerable, which means it's at higher risk than its cousins. If you're ever in Palau and you see one of these snakes, you're looking at something that's pretty special and potentially endangered. Beyond habitat loss, there's also the pet trade to consider. Flying snakes are occasionally captured for the exotic pet industry, although they're not as popular as some other species. This is less of a concern than habitat destruction, but it's still something to be aware of. The good news is that flying snakes are relatively adaptable, at least compared to some other species. They've been known to live in agricultural areas and even in cities, as long as there's enough tree cover for them to navigate. They're survivors. They've been doing this gliding thing for millions of years, and they're not going anywhere just because humans are around. But it's still worth being mindful of our impact on their habitats. Because let's be honest, we need the snakes more than they need us. They've been doing just fine for millennia without us. We can't say the same. Cultural significance. Now let's talk about how humans have perceived these creatures throughout history, because it's actually pretty interesting. In many parts of Southeast Asia, flying snakes have a place in local folklore and mythology. In some cultures, they're seen as symbols of good luck or spiritual protection. In others, they're associated with rain and fertility, probably because they often appear during the monsoon season, when the canopy is lush and full of prey. The golden tree snake, Chrysopelea ornata, is particularly significant in some regions. In parts of India and Sri Lanka, it's sometimes considered sacred, associated with the Hindu deity Vishnu. In fact, one of the species' common names in Sri Lanka is Udusapa, which translates roughly to flying snake in Sinhala. It's not a phrase you're going to use in everyday conversation, but it's neat to know. Now, I'm not going to pretend that all cultural attitudes toward flying snakes are positive. In many places, any snake, even a completely harmless, gently gliding one, is seen as something to be feared or killed. This is understandable from an evolutionary perspective. Our ancestors who were wary of snakes were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. But it does mean that flying snakes sometimes face persecution from humans who see them as threats, even when they're not. There's also the occasional media sensationalism. Every few years, some outlet will run a story about the deadly flying snake, or the snake that can kill you from the sky, and it's almost always exaggerated or completely false. These stories do a disservice to both the snakes and the public, who end up unnecessarily afraid of creatures that are genuinely fascinating and harmless. Why this matters. The bigger picture. Here's why any of this matters. Flying snakes are a reminder that nature is full of surprises. They're a living example of evolution doing its thing, adapting creatures to their environments in ways that seem almost impossible until you see them in action. They challenge our assumptions about what animals can and can't do. They're a small window into the incredible diversity of life on this planet and the endless creativity of evolution. And honestly, they're just cool. There's nothing wrong with appreciating a creature because it's neat, even if there's no practical reason to care about it. Flying snakes don't need to be useful to be worth protecting. They don't need to benefit humans in any way to deserve a place in the world. They exist, and that's enough. But here's the practical side. Flying snakes also play an important role in their ecosystems. As predators, they help control populations of small animals, like lizards and frogs. They're part of a complex web of relationships that makes healthy ecosystems function. If they disappeared, there would be consequences. Consequences we might not fully understand until it's too late. So whether you're someone who loves animals, or just someone who likes the idea of a world full of weird, unexpected creatures, flying snakes are worth caring about. They're worth learning about, and they're worth protecting. Fun facts, the best bits. Alright, let's end on a high note with some fun facts that might make you the most interesting person at your next dinner party. Fact 1. Flying snakes can glide up to 100 meters. That's over 300 feet in a single glide. That's longer than a football field. Imagine if you could just launch yourself that far. You'd never need to learn to drive. Fact 2. They flatten their bodies not just horizontally, but vertically too. Sort of. When they're preparing to glide, their ribs spread apart, and their bodies become almost ribbon-like. It's like they turn themselves into tiny, scaly paragliders. Fact 3. Baby flying snakes can actually glide better than adults, at least in proportion to their size. This might be because they're lighter, or it might be because they practice more. Yes, baby snakes practicing to fly. I know. Fact 4. They've been observed gliding in rainy weather, which is impressive when you consider that rain adds weight and makes gliding harder. These snakes are apparently not great at checking the weather forecast before heading out. Fact 5. They're not related to any other gliding animals. Flying squirrels, flying lemurs, and Draco lizards, all completely different lineages. Flying snakes evolved their gliding ability independently, which is pretty rare in the animal kingdom. Fact 6, and this is my favorite. There's a video going around of a flying snake gliding in slow motion, and it's legitimately one of the most surreal things you'll ever see. It looks like a snake-shaped piece of ribbon floating through the air. It's equal parts beautiful and completely wrong. I highly recommend looking it up if you want to lose 10 minutes of your day to the internet. So there you have it. Flying snakes, arboreal, constricting, gliding serpents that somehow make the impossible look easy. They're a testament to the weirdness and wonder of the natural world, and a reminder that there's always something new to discover. Next time you're in a Southeast Asian rainforest, or even just watching a nature documentary, keep an eye out for these incredible creatures. They're out there, doing their thing, gliding between trees like they forgot gravity was supposed to be a thing. And if you do see one, don't panic, don't run, just watch, appreciate, and maybe take a mental note to tell your friends about the time you saw a snake flying, because not many people can say that. And that's it for today, folks. If you learned something new, and I hope you did, make sure to like this video and share it with your friends. The more people who know about these incredible creatures, the better. Also subscribe to What Is if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos like this one, covering all sorts of topics you probably never thought to ask about. There's a whole library of weird, wonderful, and occasionally terrifying knowledge waiting for you. And don't forget to check out our other videos. I've got links right here on screen. There's everything from deep dives into historical events, to explanations of natural phenomena, to breakdowns of concepts you've probably heard about, but never fully understood. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.